The smell of flowers in the dead of night was the last thing I expected to wake me up. It started faint, like a distant memory. I'd been tossing and turning in my bed, unable to find sleep, when the aroma first reached me. It was soft, sweet, and undeniably floral, a mix of lilies and something sharper, like jasmine. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but the scent grew stronger, more insistent, until it filled the entire room. I sat up, my heart pounding. My windows were closed, and my bedroom door was shut. There was no logical explanation for where the smell was coming from. I glanced at the clock on my nightstand. It was 2:47 a.m. Who the hell smells flowers at this hour? I muttered to myself, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The scent shifted suddenly, becoming more intense, as if a bouquet had been shoved right under my nose. I coughed, the sweetness almost suffocating. And then I noticed it, the faintest trace of light, a soft, golden glow, seeping through the crack at the bottom of my bedroom door. I stared at the light, my mind racing. I lived alone. There shouldn't have been anyone else in the house, and certainly no reason for a light to be on at this hour. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No answer. The floral scent grew stronger, tugging at something deep inside me. It was intoxicating, almost hypnotic. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, hesitating for a moment before standing. Maybe the neighbor's garden? I thought, though the idea didn't make sense. The windows were shut, and my house was sealed tight. I opened the bedroom door cautiously, the creak of the hinges echoing in the silence. The hallway was bathed in a soft, golden glow, though I couldn't see the source. The floral scent was overwhelming now, beckoning me forward. I stepped into the hallway, my bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The light seemed to retreat as I moved, always just out of reach, drawing me further into the house. "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling. The only response was the silence, heavy and oppressive. I followed the light down the stairs and into the living room. The golden glow illuminated the space in a way that felt unnatural. It wasn't like the warm light of a lamp or a candle. This light shimmered, as though alive, pulsing faintly with each passing second. The scent was strongest here, almost unbearable. It wrapped around me like a physical presence, making my head spin. And then I saw it. In the center of the room, where my coffee table should have been, stood a single vase. It was tall and ornate, made of black glass that seemed to absorb the surrounding light. Inside the vase was a bouquet of flowers, white lilies, their petals delicate and pristine. I froze, my heart racing. That vase hadn't been there before. I took a step closer, unable to resist the pull of the flowers. The golden light seemed to emanate from them, bathing the room in an ethereal glow. As I drew nearer, I noticed something strange. The petals of the lilies were moving, ever so slightly, as if caught in a breeze I couldn't feel. "Where did you come from?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The flowers seemed to shiver in response, their motion subtle but deliberate. And then I heard it, a whisper, soft and distant, like wind moving through tall grass. "Come closer." I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The whisper was faint, but unmistakable. "No," I said aloud, shaking my head. "This isn't real." But the scent grew stronger, wrapping around me like a vice. The golden light pulsed, the whispering growing louder. "Come closer." Panic surged through me, and I turned to leave the room. But as I stepped toward the doorway, the golden light flickered and dimmed. "You can't leave," the whisper said, louder now. I froze, my chest tightening. The air in the room felt heavier, the floral scent almost choking me. I turned back toward the vase, my mind racing for an explanation. This had to be a dream. It couldn't be real. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A single petal detached from one of the lilies, floating gently to the ground. As it landed, the wood beneath it blackened and cracked as though burned. I stared at the charred mark, my pulse pounding in my ears. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Stay." I bolted for the door, my panic overriding the strange pull of the flowers. As I reached the threshold, the golden light flared, filling the room with a blinding brilliance. And then it was gone. The living room was dark and silent, the overpowering scent of flowers replaced by the familiar smell of wood and dust. I flipped the light switch, my hands trembling. The room was exactly as it should have been. My coffee table back in its place, the vase of lilies nowhere to be seen. For a moment, I stood there, struggling to catch my breath. Had I imagined the whole thing? I looked down at the floor where the petal had landed. The wood was unmarked, as though nothing had happened. But as I turned to head back upstairs, a faint whisper echoed through the room. "Don't follow the scent." The whisper haunted me. "Don't follow the scent." It echoed in my mind long after I returned to bed, keeping me awake as I stared at the ceiling. The golden light, the vase, the lilies, it had all felt so real. Yet when I went back downstairs in the morning, everything was normal. Almost everything. The floral scent still lingered. It wasn't as overpowering as before, but it was there, a faint, persistent sweetness that clung to the air no matter how many windows I opened. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of my senses. But deep down, I knew better. Over the next few days, strange things began happening around the house. It started small. Objects weren't where I'd left them, and lights flickered at odd times. But soon, the scent of flowers began to grow stronger, as though the house itself was breathing it out. One night, I found a petal on the kitchen counter, a white lily petal, soft and pristine. My stomach churned as I picked it up, half expecting it to burn my skin. It didn't, but the unease it brought was just as searing. I searched the entire house, looking for the source of the petal, but found nothing. No vase, no flowers, just that single perfect petal. The whispers started again that night. At first, they were faint, blending with the sounds of the wind outside. But as the clock struck 3 a.m., they grew louder, more distinct. "Follow the scent. Don't let it fade. Find us?" I sat up in bed, clutching the covers as the voices filled the room. They weren't coming from any one direction. They seemed to seep from the walls, the floor, the very air itself. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving the room in an oppressive silence. And then I smelled it, the floral scent, stronger than ever, wafting through the crack under my bedroom door. Despite my fear, I got out of bed and opened the door. The hallway was dark, but the scent was unmistakable. It pulled at me, leading me toward the stairs. "Don't follow it," I muttered to myself, remembering the warning. But my feet moved on their own, as though the scent had wrapped invisible strings around me. I reached the living room, my pulse racing. The golden light was back, faint but present, shimmering like a mirage. And there it was again, the vase. It stood in the center of the room, just as it had before. The lilies were brighter this time, their petals almost glowing in the dim light. The whispers returned, louder now, urgent. "Take one." I froze, staring at the flowers. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm not doing this." The light flickered, and the whispers turned harsher, angrier. "Take one." My hands trembled as I reached for the vase. The pull was irresistible, a magnetic force drawing me closer. As my fingers brushed one of the petals, a searing pain shot through my hand. I yanked it back, staring at the angry red mark on my palm. The whispers stopped instantly. The golden light dimmed, and the floral scent dissipated, leaving the room cold and silent. I backed away, my heart pounding. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. A single petal detached from the flower, floating to the ground. As it landed, words appeared on the surface, scrawled in jagged black lines. "You invited us?" The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that the vase wasn't just an illusion. It felt like a warning, or a message I didn't yet understand. I decided to dig into the history of my house. It was old, built in the early 1900s, and had passed through several owners before me. None of the previous sales had raised any red flags, but there was one name that stood out: Margaret Dorn. She had lived in the house during the 1950s and was known locally as a recluse. A quick search online brought up an article about her disappearance. Margaret Dorn vanished without a trace in 1957. Neighbors reported strange smells and lights coming from her house in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Authorities found no signs of foul play, though an unusual vase of lilies was discovered in the living room. My blood ran cold. The article included a photo of the vase. It was identical to the one I'd seen in my house. That night, the scent returned stronger than ever. It filled the house, pressing against my senses until I could hardly think. The whispers came with it, louder and more insistent. Follow the scent. Take one. Bring us back. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever was happening, it wasn't going to stop on its own. I descended the stairs slowly, the scent growing thicker with each step. The golden light filled the living room, and the vase was waiting for me, its flowers shimmering with an unnatural glow. This time, the whispers were clear, a single voice rising above the others. Choose one. My hand trembled as I reached for the lilies, my mind racing. What would happen if I took one? What would happen if I didn't? As my fingers closed around a petal, the whispers turned into a deafening roar, and the room was consumed by blinding light. The blinding light swallowed the room, leaving me disoriented and gasping for air. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust, but the golden glow was overwhelming. When the light finally faded, I realized I wasn't in my living room anymore. I stood in a field bathed in twilight, the air thick with the scent of flowers. The ground was soft beneath my feet, carpeted in lilies that stretched as far as the eye could see. They shimmered faintly, their petals glowing with an unnatural light. The sky above was an oppressive gray, devoid of stars or a moon. The only source of illumination came from the flowers themselves, their eerie radiance casting long, shifting shadows across the field. Where am I? I whispered, my voice trembling. The whispering returned, surrounding me on all sides. You followed the scent. You took the petal. You're here now. I turned in a slow circle, trying to find the source of the whispers, but there was no one else in sight. The field seemed endless, the flowers swaying gently in a breeze I couldn't feel. Who are you? I called out, my voice cracking. The whispers didn't answer directly. Instead, they shifted, blending into a single voice, soft, melodic, and chillingly familiar. You invited us, it said. I froze, the words sending a shiver down my spine. I didn't invite anyone, I said, my voice shaking. I don't know what you want from me. The ground beneath me seemed to ripple, the lilies trembling as the voice grew louder. You opened the door. You followed the scent. Now you belong to us. A figure emerged from the sea of flowers, its movements slow and deliberate. At first, I thought it was a person, but as it drew closer, I realized how wrong I was. It was tall and impossibly thin, its body draped in flowing black fabric that billowed around it like smoke. Its face was obscured, but its eyes burned with a golden light, the same hue as the lilies. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. What do you want? The figure tilted its head, the motion unnervingly fluid. You must finish what you started, it said, its voice echoing in my mind rather than my ears. What does that mean? I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. The figure extended a hand, its long, skeletal fingers beckoning me forward. Follow the path, it said. Return what was taken. Only then can you leave. A narrow path opened before me, the lilies parting to reveal a trail that stretched into the distance. The ground was darker here, the flowers on either side wilting and turning to ash as the path formed. I didn't want to go. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run in the opposite direction. But there was nowhere else to go, just an endless field of glowing flowers and the oppressive presence of the figure watching me. With trembling legs, I stepped onto the path. The whispers grew softer, more distant, as I moved forward. The air grew colder, and the glow of the lilies faded, replaced by an unsettling darkness that pressed in from all sides. I walked for what felt like hours, the path winding through the endless field. The figure followed at a distance, its golden eyes never leaving me. Eventually, the path led to a clearing. In the center stood a strange structure, a towering shrine made entirely of black glass, its surface polished to a mirror-like sheen. The whispers returned, louder and more frantic. "Return it. Set it right. Restore what you took." I approached the shrine cautiously, my reflection distorted in the dark glass. At its base was a single lily, its petals brighter than any I'd seen before. The petal I had taken earlier burned in my pocket, a searing heat that made me wince. "You took what was not yours," the figure said, its voice resonating around me. "Return it, or remain here forever." I pulled the petal from my pocket, the heat scorching my fingers. The moment I placed it on the lily, the ground trembled and the shrine began to glow. The golden light grew brighter and brighter, enveloping me once more. When the light faded, I was back in my living room. The vase was gone, the lilies nowhere in sight. The air was still, and the overpowering floral scent had vanished. For a moment, I thought it was over, but then I noticed the marks. Burned into the wooden floor where the vase had stood was the outline of a single lily, its petals charred black. And in the silence, I heard it again, the faintest whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. "We'll be waiting." The whisper left me paralyzed, its words echoing in my mind. "We'll be waiting." I stared at the charred outline of the lily on the floor, my thoughts racing. The vase was gone, the floral scent dissipated, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something had stayed behind. For days, I tried to convince myself it was over. I scrubbed the floor, hoping to erase the mark, but the scorch never faded. The house felt heavier, quieter, as though it were holding its breath. And then one night, the scent returned. It was faint at first, drifting through the air like a distant memory. But by midnight, it had grown stronger, more insistent, filling every corner of the house. I followed the scent to the living room, dreading what I might find. The vase was back, standing exactly where it had been before. This time, the lilies were in full bloom, their petals glowing with an intensity that cast long shadows across the walls. The whispers began immediately, louder than ever. "Follow the scent. Finish the journey. Come back to us." I backed away, my heart pounding. "No," I said aloud, my voice trembling. "I returned what you wanted. I did everything you asked." The whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew angrier, the tone sharper and more urgent. "You broke the cycle. You owe us. Bring us back." The room began to change. The walls faded into darkness, and the floor beneath me transformed into soft earth. I was no longer in my house, but back in the field of lilies, their eerie glow casting an otherworldly light on the horizon. The figure was waiting for me, its golden eyes burning with intensity. "You thought you could leave," it said, its voice cold and unforgiving. "But the door is still open. The cycle is incomplete. What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice breaking. I returned the petal. "I did everything you asked." "You opened the door," it replied. "Now you must close it." The lilies around me began to wilt, their glowing petals falling to the ground and turning to ash. The sky darkened, the oppressive gray replaced by an endless black. "You will finish what you started," the figure said, extending its skeletal hand. A new path appeared, cutting through the dying field. At the end of it stood a towering door, made of the same black glass as the shrine. Light seeped through the edges, flickering like a flame. "This is the last step," the figure said. "Close the door, and your debt will be paid. Leave it open, and the bloom will consume all." I hesitated, my legs trembling as I stepped toward the door. The whispers surrounded me, louder and more frantic than ever. "Don't trust it. Close the door. Let us through." I reached the door, my hand hovering over its cold, smooth surface. The light spilling from the edges pulsed, growing brighter with every passing second. "What happens if I close it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The figure didn't answer. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a deafening roar. My head throbbed, my vision swimming as the light from the door threatened to blind me. I didn't know what would happen if I closed it, but I knew what would happen if I didn't. The cycle would continue, the scent would return, and the lilies would bloom endlessly, pulling others into their trap. With a deep breath, I pressed my hands against the door and pushed. The light flared, burning my skin as the door creaked shut. The whispers turned into screams, fading into silence as the door slammed closed. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my living room. The vase was gone, and the floral scent had vanished completely. The charred mark on the floor had disappeared, leaving the wood smooth and unblemished. The house felt lighter, the oppressive weight lifted for the first time in weeks. I sank onto the couch, my body trembling with exhaustion. It was over, or so I thought. For weeks, everything seemed normal. The nights were quiet, and the house felt like mine again. But every so often, I caught a faint whiff of flowers, soft and fleeting, like a memory just out of reach. And sometimes, late at night, I heard it again, a whisper, distant but unmistakable. Don't follow the scent.